Well, I think we are. I think we're live and recording, so I think we're good to go. Uh, so I'll just kind of intro for those that are watching the replay, or for those that are watching in. Looks like just looking to hear Andy's thoughts based on the description of this call. Let me see. Now I'm getting like a request from somebody, so I want to make sure I'm not weird. Link works. Okay, perfect. I got a comment that said the link works. All right.
Great.
So we're live officially with Andy Squyres. So like I mentioned, we do these weekly. Whole point of these calls is what I like to call a virtual potluck, where we bring our ideas together as creatives, share what the Lord's working on our hearts and how he's working through our creative work, and then how we're just putting that out into the world. And today I'm bringing along a new friend, hopefully, Andy Squyres, who I've had the privilege of meeting like once or twice in passing, but getting the chance to really digest a lot of the content and a lot of the things that you put out into the world through speaking and through Guild Conference. I'm also a big fan of your music. In fact, I jokingly was telling a friend about this conversation that we were about to have today. And we were also in the same breath kind of talking about just like our need to catch up and hang out, as you do with friends. And I said, "Hey man, I just got a new fireplace, and he's like, "I have a lot of firewood to burn." And I said, "Well, you bring the firewood, I'll bring the beer." And he said, "Is that an Andy Squyres lyric?" And I said, "Maybe it is. I'm not sure." But I'm just super thankful that you're here. And yeah, just love to hear a little bit about you. Maybe introduce yourself to those that might be in this group that don't know you, and just tell us about your creative projects and all the things that you do, because I know you're a multi-medium creative.
Yeah. So I'm primarily a writer. But when I say primarily a writer, I only mean that in the sense that I don't paint. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a sculptor or a potter. I write songs and I write books that begin as Instagram posts. So that's, um, that's other than touring, that's basically how I make my living, is through my words. And at the moment, for 2025, I'm kind of starting to hyper focus on music again. I've put out 3 out of the last 4 years. I've put out a new book. So I've done 3 books within the last 4 years that are super heavy on the writing side, and then the production side takes a lot of work, and because of that I haven't done as much music. I've played live music a lot, but I haven't written a ton of new music. So I'm all of a sudden stepping back into my musician mode more than my writer mode, and that's super
Interesting.
fun, exciting. Yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
Nice. Yeah, I know. One of the things I loved about I think I found your music first, and then I saw you at Guild Conference, like the very first one that you came out for that in Raleigh. And one of the things I loved about that was the way you kind of incorporated the two. And I remember you speaking there too about how you see just those two creative works kind of as the same, writing as the same, and just the two different mediums in which they kind of manifest themselves
Yeah.
out into the world and into the space. And so just like a quick tidbit, because one of the things I do always like to do in these conversations is like pull apart just little tactics, because sometimes I think in like podcasts and seminars and all the things you can just get lost in like the theory. But like, so you said you start writing with Instagram posts. Is that actually how you kind of seed your ideas and kind of capture your thoughts and ideas and then develop them into bigger works?
Yeah, I mean, there is no bigger works. Like, so if you see one of my books and you open up a page, you're essentially just reading a social media post,
Yeah.
which can sound very shallow and meaningless. But I think there's a lot of meaning in those posts when they first find themselves in the abyss of social media. But
Yeah.
it's the theory is that it's better to have a concrete something in your hand than to just, I mean, I'm not, I mean, I fully understand the dark side of the internet and the amount of our lives that we can waste on social media. But it's also true that we find good things on the internet and we find good things
Yeah.
on social media. And I think, not that I have this project to redeem social media. I absolutely don't think that way, but I do think of it as a tool to be able to use for good things. I mean, I think the art and craft of writing is is something that we should publish on our social media platforms if we can. So, yeah, but all of the thoughts that I'm generating, on a daily basis either make their way into a book, a post or a book or a song. And a lot of times between the songs and the books, there's some cross-pollination, because usually I'm having more than one thought about a certain theme. And then, you use the word manifest. It can take on the different forms.
Yeah.
All that to say is that I'm not using the same idea in either of
Yeah.
those categories.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I love that idea about just not even kind of restructuring your approach to the social media posts, and not only the intention that you're giving to it, but also then like saying like it's also more, and like there's more depth here. You can spend even more time with it, more than just a scroll, and kind of developing it into more. I love that. And it's funny because I feel like at first brush, somebody could probably look at like maybe even just the aesthetic and how you put your stuff out there into the world as someone who does maybe even think that way of like, nah, I really don't care about the social media game. Like, and I use game, you know,
Yeah.
flippantly, but like I think I was trying to find this just to like reference it visually, but there was I think it was a meme that came across one of the many social meme accounts out there that had like traditional CCM kind of walking by, and then in the back you have Andy Squyres, which was this I believe it was a homeless man holding a bottle kind of
Yeah.
back there. And I was like, man, that's something that I think is portrayed out there and maybe thought of as like you're kind of this outsider from the CCM world, and maybe even true in ways. And
Mhm.
I'm curious how you think of that, and if you do that on purpose, or where you're at with all that. Like, why is that true and why is it not?
Well, it's true because, I like to describe what I do or who I am as being, I'm niche. So like CCM music is a subculture of culture. So you have overall culture and then there's CCM. And then I'm not necessarily invited to the CCM party just because of the way I sing about God. So I'm absolutely obsessed with singing about God, but I'm not really, I don't feel compelled to write worship music as we know worship music currently. And I don't feel compelled to write, radio friendly CCM, which, I think I've changed my position on that world a little bit. I've been super hypercritical of it. And maybe that was initially fine just for the sake of my own needing to resist that world
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to do something else. But I do kind of like understand like not everybody is going to care about what Andy Squyres says about something, or maybe not cares is the wrong way to say it. It's like the way I'm trying to think about God or communicate him it's a little bit challenging because I love poetry. So a lot of the way I speak it's not overtly clear, but I do that intentionally because those are the types of artists that I love. I love to be
Yeah.
intrigued, but I realize that not everybody is up for that. So I think that, for those people who are just working their regular jobs and they don't have time to think about whatever weird thoughts I'm thinking about, I completely empathize with that. And so I don't want to write that world off, but the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I do what I do is because I'm really, I want to do good work.
Yeah.
I more than not trying to evangelize people with my music or my books. I'm not trying to convince people of anything, but that's not to say that my work's not persuasive.
Yeah.
I think that good art will be compelling in a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
But at least my conviction on it is that when somebody who is a Christ follower sets out to make art, but their number one value is some kind of evangelical Christian agenda of like making converts, then
Yeah.
I think the art suffers. I think the culture suffers. I think I think music just gets really bad at that point. And then the other fascinating dynamic that we live in is because we are so driven by the market, and I have no answers for what I'm talking about. So I'm just an idiot.
None
But
of us do, really.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
none of us do. But the difficulty of living in the or living under the powers and principalities that we happen to be living under, which is, well, we live in scarcity, right? So nobody can afford eggs. Most people are struggling to afford groceries and rent. So when you start making music or art, you're up against the same forces as everybody else. You really would like to pay your mortgage. You would like to have a mortgage. So I think that is also another very difficult thing that people have to struggle through. And not everybody should be making, God, I don't know how to say this, but like I have friends in the CCM world who are much smarter than me, more talented than I am, and actually have a lot of integrity, and they make so much money. And I think I'm grateful for that. I'm honest.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be poor. I'm not doing the things I'm doing because I have these, ascetic principles of suffering being more spiritual than
Yeah.
having things. But I do think that I feel very gratified that I have come to an understanding of what my calling is and then the price that I have to pay to fulfill that calling. And I think that when you can come to terms with that, your life becomes more peaceful because you no longer compare yourself up against your friends that are doing something different than you,
Yeah.
that they may be experiencing more success, quote, air quotes, success in.
Yeah.
Because I think that if God calls you to something, which I actually believe in that, I believe in vocational callings in
Yeah.
people's lives. And I believe that I was created by God to do a certain thing and to have a certain voice that is not uniform with the rest of the voices in the world. And
Yeah.
so I'm in my middle age now. And so I'm much more comfortable in my own skin than I was maybe 20 or 15 years ago, where I was more kind of like scrambling and grasping
Yeah.
for something else that wasn't necessarily me, trying to fit into that world. And so that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as I've, progressed more in my quote unquote career as a creative, and vocational calling, and then even talk to others, like, how did you, like, when you say you just dealt with the price that you had to pay, like, flesh that out for me a little bit, to use the term we all love, like,
Yeah.
because I feel that. And even as I was like just getting into like playing music live, of course, like I started in the church. And so even like having conversations with money with church, it like just became weird to me. And I just
Mm.
became like thrown out. And like I never had anybody to like really speak into that. And I always wanted somebody to that was like years ahead, that has been like, yeah, I understood this, or maybe I didn't. And here's where I settled. Like, do you get what I'm saying with
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I could build from the ground up, like if the culture didn't exist, the church artist music thing didn't exist right now,
Yeah.
I would do it a little differently than it exists. I think what I would say is that I think that I would steer clear of the big mega church model, and I would have a lot more smaller congregations where the musicians were serving in the church on Sunday mornings just as volunteers. And I would take that money piece out of the church. And for people who were actually called and or desired to make art for a living, in this case to make music for a living, I would say don't depend on the church to pay your bills. I would say go build a life of making something that the world wants, whether they're believers or not. Be so good at what you're doing that enough people will give you their coins so that you can keep doing what you want to do. I think that, in my life, I mostly sell tickets for my shows. So I don't do worship nights. I don't do nights of ministry. I say I am an artist, and artists do two things. They entertain and they provoke. I'm more in the work of provocation, but people do come away feeling different feelings than they do in their normal lives. So I guess that could be in the entertainment world as well. But occasionally a church will invite me into, you know, to a situation where I'm not selling tickets, and they ask how much I want for an honorarium, and I give them an amount, and they say, yes, we can afford that, or no, we can't. If they can't afford it, then it's great. It's a blessing, but it's never excessive, and it's never in the guise of ministry. It's always in the, hey, Andy Squyres is a singer-songwriter, and he makes his living at the craft of singing songs that he writes. And so we're going to pay him a fair wage to do that. And, I try to take out all language of doing it for God, doing it for the sake of the ministry. If there's actually a change of money, I'm very upfront about it. They're just, there's that saying that I've heard so many places now, but I just love it. Clarity is kindness, I don't want anything to be veiled in God's spiritual language, because when you do that, everything gets confusing, and it just becomes the possibility for manipulation and misunderstanding increases when you veil things in the God language, So I don't live in that world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think I got out of that world fast because it was too messy. Like it was just like, okay, this is different. And I think I love that idea of like being clear about like, no, I'm an artist. This is what I do. This is the craft that I do. Here's what that looks like in the marketplace or whatever, and whether that's, fulfilling a role in, like you said, entertainment or provoking.
Right.
In that way. So obviously that's a completely different direction. And I do want to get to that whole side of it, because I think the two definitely interplay, even in relationship with like I make music that is for that I want to be to help people cultivate a life dedicated to Jesus. Like that's what I say. And so like obviously like the music that I put out is bent towards people doing that, and that is for a particular audience. I don't think that's necessarily evangelistic in nature of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
But how do you like, I guess, balance that clarity in your art, like when you're working, if that makes sense, like clarity of like, here, this is like my Christian working out in my humanity, in my work as a music, as a writer, in general.
Well, I
Because you
mean,
get forced into the niche, right? And you even said you're a niche.
people who have me in their churches mostly already know what I do, so they're already familiar with the way I think about God and the way I sing about God and the way I would communicate about God. So I don't really have to do a lot of legwork on that. Sometimes I'll play in a certain theological context where they don't want me to use salty language, and they'll ask me to refrain from, a couple of my songs have like the word damn in it or something like that. And, but most of the time, if I'm getting invited into a church context, it's because they're already up for what I do, So I don't really spend a lot of time having to tell people, hey, this isn't a worship night, right? Or, this isn't, I'm not going to probably work at your youth crusade. Like,
Yeah.
if you're trying to get people to come to the altar to convert to Christianity, Andy Squyres is not your guy. I think people they're more connected to me in the way of like, I don't know, people who are at a different season or phase of their Christian life where they've gotten kind of burned out on the do good, be better, get more for God Christianity, you know, and they're kind of like settling. They're looking for a sustainable faith. They're looking for a faith that will take them into their old age. I guess if you were going to categorize that, is maybe that's more in line with discipleship. But the discipleship that I'm offering is not how do we help people be better Christians. It's more of just like this perpetual call to boasting in Christ only, you know, boasting in weakness, boasting in the death of Christ, boasting in the grace of God, not relying on ourselves for anything. That's kind of the main theological framework of my songs. And so, I mean, I don't get a lot of invitations into, you know, Baptist contexts.
Yeah.
You know, Reformed Calvinists don't often have me, you know, at their places of worship, but sometimes they do. You know, it's not always a deal breaker. That's the genius of art, is that when human beings are discussing God through systematic theological categories, it presents such an opportunity to divide. And art has a way of building bridges, building ecumenical bridges where we can think twice before we crucify somebody over some kind of like perceived theological error, you know?
Yeah. I think that might even just be the inherent nuance of art itself. Like there's safety in metaphor sometimes, just as an artist, where it's like I'm still working this out myself, even and trying to figure out how these things.
I think art is the great acknowledgement that so much of this stuff isn't even landed yet, and even the things that we would call like the major signposts of Orthodox Christianity. I mean, like take the Creed, for instance, like the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed. To me, at least, those are immovable pillars. And like once those don't become important to you anymore, then you've moved on to something else, which is philosophically fine, but it's not what makes a Christian distinct. Those are the distinctions of being a Christian, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that even those confessions they're much deeper and robust than what we know them to be. So I would say that art allows us to investigate, well, as Paul would call it, the riches of Christ, the depth of the riches of Christ, you know?
Yeah.
So the categories in systematic theology are really helpful for us to make sense of the world, but they're insufficient for being able to see God in his fullness. So that's why you need the artists.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I remember this year, even at Guild, your idea of the epiphanizer.
Yep.
Like and the artist being the one to draw that out. So
Yep.
like, I 100% agree, but I even think for me, and maybe even like I operate probably in the different context than you. Like I am in the more like reformed like camps and like around me, and so there's some like sometimes we white knuckle that.
Yeah.
In the camps that I'm in, where it's like we can't let go of the system because we're afraid of what might happen if we do.
Yes.
And are we sure the artists are being safe with their seeking of Christ? And so like even as you're doing that yourself, like what are maybe even some of the practices or things that you do where you're like, no, this is how I seek Christ and the goodness of Christ and these practice, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do two things at once.
Okay.
I drill down into orthodoxy as hard as I possibly can. I commit myself to the proclamation of the life and the death, the resurrection and the ascension of the man Christ Jesus. That's like, to me, that is the unalterable metaphysic that without that, I have nothing, you know? So openly admitting that, confessing that, making sure that that is the anchor of my soul is essential to my well-being. I believe it. I believe that confession is actually the reason why I have thrived as a human being, right? But I will say that it's also my insistence on that orthodoxy that allows me to go to the farthest outreaching places as my convictions will allow me, and I will say this is a thought that really set me free at some point. Somewhere along the line, I realized that systems of belief are not God. Okay. So you can actually idolize your system of belief. I think that this is one of the glaring weaknesses found within the more staunch reformed streams of the body of Christ, is that they're so adamant about their belief system that they confuse that system with the system that God has invented and signed up for, or even created, And while I'm not an anarchist, I fully affirm that human organization demands some agreed upon values in order for us to, be able to get along. If we hold those things tighter than, well, if we hold them so much that we become blind to the possibility of a new way of thinking about God. I mean, I know even that phrase would be absolute scary heresy to some people.
To some,
but I would say, like, so many people have had the experience of going to the movies and seeing a filmmaker tell a redemptive story, maybe about a world that the viewer has no connection to, but that viewer has some kind of emotional epiphany based upon what they're witnessing on the screen. And maybe it was a brand new concept that they had never even, maybe it was like an emotional closet somewhere in their heart that they had never opened the door to, that this filmmaker was able to extract out. I've had that experience so many times where it caused my knees to hit the floor and my hands to raise to the sky and just bless the name of the Lord, because there was such my awareness increased of the glory of God on the earth and in heaven, So I think that's why we need the poets. That's why we need the songwriters and the filmmakers and the writers and, all of the artistic pursuits.
Yeah. I want to kind of go into one particular area for specifically like artists and creators, and we like out of the music space, because one of the things I like about you is you are a multidisciplinary creative, and those in the group we have some that are like seeking to be like podcasters and like make videos, and some that are like seeking to paint and to make good art that is invoking of thought, and like just all over the place. And so I want to dive in a little bit deeper into maybe some of the questions that they have. So I know there's a couple people watching, so if you have questions, drop them in the chat on the side and we'll get to them in a little bit. But when you talk about, like, I want to use another term, I always quote Makoto Fujimura. If you've ever read any of his stuff, he talks about this idea of like artists being border walkers between culture and the faith and truth. And I think there's truth to that, and I think there's a lot there. I think one of the things I think you wrote in an Instagram post recently that I said I wanted to bring up, especially around the time of the halftime show and all the thoughts and things swirling around, like, and I don't even necessarily want to get into any of that, but I took a quote that I just want to like hear you talk a little bit more about, maybe even more so than you already have. But you said, not all artists have the job of mystifying an audience. These kinds of artists are called entertainers or worship leaders in church world, which I thought was fun. Not all artistic endeavors should be too obscure. We're mistaken if we demand clarity from poets, but we are also mistaken if we demand enigma from entertainers. What do we do with that?
Well, I think it's the acknowledgement that if you're going to have a wedding and you're going to ask the DJ to play a bunch of Andy Squyres and John Mark McMillan songs, it's going to be kind of a downer party, right? So we have to have party songs, right? Like, we need the disco bands, we need the pop artists that are, telling everybody to get up and have a good time. Like, not all music needs to be introspective, not all of it needs to be philosophical. I love philosophy and theology. I love philosophizing and theologizing, but I don't want to do it 100% of the time in my life, right?
Yeah.
I occasionally want a song that I can just sing out loud in my car that is maybe utterly meaningless. Maybe I, just dancing with my kids or my grandkids or whatever,
Yeah.
And at the same time, we can't lock down the Kendrick Lamars of the world when what they're saying doesn't make sense to our ears. Like, it's as soon as that Kendrick Lamar thing came out, it was so funny how many memes I saw of it was like white people. I can't understand any of the words that are coming out of Kendrick Lamar's mouth. And then also white people. And it had a video clip of Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder singing Even Flow. And it's like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, he might as well have been speaking in tongues, but I think one of the very first things that good art does for us is that it exposes hypocrisy. It exposes the false gods that we give ourselves to, where we automatically want to crucify the other. We automatically want to destroy the person who doesn't look like us, doesn't sound like us, or is saying things that we don't understand, or even worse, saying things that we do understand and are offended by, which is so interesting because that's exactly what Jesus did over and over and over. Between the Pharisees and then his own disciples, he was only ever misunderstood. Like, I can't, like, at the end of, as in the final chapters of his life, when, I think it's in Luke 7, but it's much later in the Gospel of Matthew, but it's like Jesus is turning his face towards Jerusalem. He's getting ready to enter his passion. And a few times he's having to speak to his disciples who have been with him for 3 whole years. And he's saying, have I been with you this long and you still do not understand what I am about? And there's something prophetic about that. There's something ongoing within the history of humanity where we actually, when truth comes to us, forget truth. I mean, I don't mean forget it altogether. I'm saying, for the sake of this conversation, what does it mean even for us to be confronted by an artist who we might even just disagree with the perception that they have?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's something for us to get, but we get so ruffled so quickly. We turn off any potential for the Spirit to speak to our hearts through this artist. We shut down our capacity because we're so afraid of things we don't understand. This is one of the most common dynamics of being a human being. And to be perfectly honest, I know Kendrick's catalog a little bit, but I'm not a Kendrick aficionado by any means.
Yeah.
But even when I could not understand, I've seen him twice, because he was in this year's Super Bowl, but then the previous year, I think it was Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, where Kendrick got a 2-minute slot.
Yeah.
I just remember the performance piece to that was so riveting. The acts that the dancers were doing, I remember like orange prison jumpsuits and, black men in chains. And it was riveting. So even if you didn't agree with the politics of it right away, there was something so profound that was being orchestrated that you'd have to be a robot actually for it, at least in my view, for it to not touch your heart,
Yeah.
So the reason why I wrote that piece is because I think that the average citizen, and it's funny because we kind of started this whole talk off where I was talking about how, hey, K-Love is for some people who just live regular lives and they don't have energy to really discern art in reality. You know, that's an okay thing, but you will be confronted by God in that. Your ordinary everyday life can't be your idol. You know, your middle class suburban life, while it may be normal to you, it can't be above what God wants for you in your life. So I think God in his mercy interjects these disruptions into our lives where our false gods get confronted. And a lot of times he's going to use an artist to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're dead on. And I think even artists have the ability to even teach people how to be confronted with God in the ordinary too. And
Definitely.
and to begin to live themselves in an artful way because they're created beings in and of themselves. I think you've said things around that. I'm sure you have a bunch. I do want to question though, like when you're saying, like, how do you discern? Because we fight. I agree in the sense that like we have some people that are like the call against the machine and what's going on, and then some that are like, I'm here to be a comfort food to your soul right now, or even just a comfort to your late night couch binge with your wife after a long day. Like these creations have their spot. But I think sometimes artists can either one fight the like or desire to like discern, like say this is me, like this is the art that I make and that's okay, and I'm not guilty about it. How do you discern the difference for yourself? Like this is like I'm gonna be the sad artist, or I'm gonna be the TikTok artist, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like because I think even like those things form how we make.
Yeah, they do.
And it's just messy now. It's messier now.
Oh man, there's a really interesting. I have alluded to this book so many times in my life. I should just steal the idea and call it my own at this point. But David Byrne wrote a book maybe 10, 12 years ago called How Music Works. And the very first essay in that book is about how the number one creative driver for an artist, a musician, is not a person's inner world. It's not their emotions, the inspiration. It's not an inspiration out in the world, but it's the architecture of where the music is going to be played. And then he does this little history through all of the history of music where he's connecting the style of music that's being played. He's connecting it to the building, the actual space that the music is being played in. And so he goes from the caves through all of the classical periods into the jazz and modern era, even into contemporary evangelical worship music, how the music that human beings make is primarily led by the spaces that those compositions are going to be played in.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because I'm pretty sure this book, the observations he was making was really prior to streaming, like Spotify streaming. But I would say that between Spotify and TikTok, the architecture of those platforms is definitely forming artists.
Yeah.
It is definitely driving
It can't not.
creative compositions. It can't not. Yeah. Let me give you a really classic example, or a practical example, I should say. Like my last record, Poet Priest, was a massive, massive sounding record. It's a 7-piece band. It has huge dynamics. Like the audio range on that record it's bombastic, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It actually doesn't travel well through AirPods.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't travel well through Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that, I reverted back to some of my like folkier inclinations, some like folk pop inclinations, because I knew that the music was going to be primarily traveling through AirPods, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think your original question about, can you refresh me? What was?
No, it's good. I think,
Yeah,
we're in the depths of the creative life, just the mod, because you're right. Like it can't not shape what we make, but
yeah,
also it's, like I said, I kind of operate in both worlds now. Like I grew up as a worship leader, and so I was in the church space, but kind of forcibly began writing. Like I didn't want to do the music thing, and then did, and now I work with creatives on music, and so it's like
yeah,
a completely different thing. And I think for me, I'm seeing just how much it's forming the artists, but art, because art drives culture so much, it's
yeah,
inadvertently like forming our churches. And like I think you're alluding to the worship leader as the entertainer, and your post was very dead on. And I think there's a lot to be said there. And I don't want to necessarily just like niche down there again and wander to and fro.
yeah,
Um, I guess like where some maybe like as we wrap up, and maybe like, because one of the things I want to do after these talks is we have follow-up calls, and like, okay, here's some actions that we can actually take
yeah,
from these things. Like,
yeah,
here's what we can do with this truth that we're learning. Like,
yeah.
so maybe even like, what are some like words, like one or two things that you would say, hey, creative artist, like if you're trying to do this professionally in the space, knowing that you're going to have to interact in these worlds, in the TikTokification of all the things, like
Yeah.
know this to be true and do this, but be weary of this, and
Yeah.
they don't necessarily have to be like clean and tidy, but you know what I'm getting after. Like, what are some things we should be weary of, and what are some things like, don't be afraid to push into these spaces.
Well, I would not be afraid to push into social media in general, because that's the marketplace, right? So it's the town farmers market. We don't have I'm not selling CDs out of the trunk of my car anymore. I am trying to get people to listen to my voice. I want people to hear my songs and my writings. So I would say don't be afraid to press into that. But I would say don't sell your soul to that thing, right? So I find that so often people will revert to, instead of being thoughtful or circumspect in their posts or in their music,
Mm-hmm.
they will they will lean on being controversial, and they'll or controversial for the sake of controversy, or they'll lean on kind of the shock and awe factor of the absurdities of life. Now, I will say that I definitely am occasionally saying things out loud that are controversial, but I do try to not have that be my only flex on when I'm talking, speaking, when I'm facing the public. I want to be gracious as much as I am also disruptive or confronting
Mm.
a power and principality that I see in operation, especially within the church. So you have to be careful with social media, because it's not only addictive for consumers, but it's addictive for people that are creating things for it, because we feel bad if we don't get likes and we feel great if we do get likes, right? There's not really a way to completely disconnect yourself from the pursuit of engagement. But I think it's really important to trust. Well, first of all, don't get good at social media, get good at your art. That would be the first thing. So, like, it could be that you're not getting engagement because you're just not good at what you're doing yet.
Yeah.
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 So that piece has to be taken care of. And
That's assumed.
yes, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's assumed. So, but then I would say hold it loosely. Like, all of this stuff I have to hold before the Lord constantly. Like it's the old comparison thing. It hardly ever goes away. It's like I have all these followers on Instagram, but I don't have any followers on TikTok. I
There's
suck. It's like,
there's always
I don't
another
know,
rabbit
man.
to chase.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the next
Yeah,
time a platform comes out is the next time I have to now rebuild my entire existence.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's the devil we can't make deals with, right?
yeah,
Like that's like, oh, it's so stupid, to be honest. Like
yeah.
I was telling my wife Amy, I was like, I think I'm just going to take this year and I'm going to disappear and I'm going to go work at Walmart for the year. And, obviously she pushed back on that and brought me to my senses. But the reality is that I think being invisible and being, you know, just kind of saying no to the expectations of producing,
hmm
having a rhythm of not working or not posting, I think is just as important as being diligent and consistent in your work. But,
Yeah,
maybe,
creating even just for yourself and not outside,
yes,
just like
yes,
different mediums, even like, yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, man, I appreciate your time. I will let any more people, if they want to drop any questions, they can. But how can we like keep up with the stuff you're gonna be putting out? I know you have a new record coming out. I've been seeing leaks of this. I know Poet Priest volumes 1 through 3 are already out. But how can we just be a part of what you're doing, and how
Oh
can
man,
people
I
get in touch with
mean,
you?
following me on Instagram's the easiest way. You can buy my books at my website, andysquyres.com. All the places you want to listen to my music, I'm there on all the streaming platforms. So yeah, all the normal ways.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for this. It's really encouraging, even for me, just to hear, just uh, I guess just truth told back to me, where it's like, hey, like seek the Lord, seek Christ and His goodness
Yeah.
in all the things that you make, and all the things that you do, and that will work out in art and in culture. And so I think you're a testament to that, and just your honesty and vulnerability is just a good example that I'm trying to follow as well. And so I just appreciate you doing what you do.
Amen. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will let you go, and I'm going to hit this leave button, and I think that might close it all out for all of us. So
All
if it
right.
does, then I will talk to you later.
Thanks,
All right.
man.
Yeah, thank you.
Later.